introducing our guest today. Now, you already know Rob and I because, well, we do this all the time. But today we've got Phil. And what's this middle name stuff? Jayhawk Chan.
That's right. What's going on,
And
Eddie?
he's from Lightspeed Investing. And we wanted to add a little different thing today. We want to be able to talk about what Rob and I like to get down, helping your businesses grow, startup, whether you're mid-sized startup, whatever it is. But we want to get into what Phil likes to get down with. And if it's light speed investing, I want to hear this personally. So Phil, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. I could just mess it all up, but why don't you tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
Lightspeed?
well, I'll kind of keep it high level and then we can go into details on whatever it is that intrigues the conversation. But, a little bit about me. I'm a city boy originally, right? That loves the suburbs. So moved from Hong Kong, city of international commerce when I was 9. But I have been Jayhawk raised here in Overland Park, Kansas, ever since I was 9. And initially I was groomed to take over my dad's accounting firm,
Mm,
right? I said thanks, no thanks, because one, I'm a city boy that loves the suburbs, and two, I didn't want to wake up and do people's taxes. So when he was like, "Okay, kiddo, well, what is it that you want to do?" I said, "I have no clue. Let me explore the medical field." And at the time, right, being a surgeon really resonated with me.
mhm.
The hands-on aspects, been an athlete my whole life, intellectually challenging aspects, and obviously, last but not least, the lucrative career aspects, right?
Sure,
But
sure.
the thing is, like, as I got immersed within that journey, right, that route to becoming a surgeon, I realized long term that that path was probably not going to be for me. And it was
Interesting.
a bit of a confluence of things, like after college, but I sacrificed a lot, right? But it was, this really started happening after college, to where my personal dream of wanting to own an NBA team really came about, right? And I recognized that if I had to accomplish that, no
Mhm.
matter how great of a surgeon I would be, that just is not a vehicle to help
Mhm.
that done,
Sure,
right?
sure.
I knew I had to pivot to entrepreneurship and figure things out. I was on my own for a good 2 years or so before I ran into my current business partner now. And that's kind of what led to the birth of Lightspeed Investing, in a very,
Nice.
very high level summary.
Yeah, I
Nice.
love.
No,
Go
I
ahead,
love
Rob.
that. And I want to jump in here real quick because I think for our audience, one of the things that's so powerful about what you just said, right? You had a pathway and it wasn't the right vehicle for you, and you understood it, you were aware of it, and then you picked another pathway and you tried it again. And I think one of the things that happens for a lot of entrepreneurs, we get down on ourselves because we feel like, tried this one thing, it wasn't it. Tried this other thing, it wasn't it. Is there something wrong with me? Is there something going on? And I love how Tony Robbins talks about, right? Life doesn't happen to you, life happens for you. Everything that's in your path is a learning journey, is a learning step along that. And, Phil, just in your journey, what were some of the things that happened when you were kind of pivoting and you were realizing that those vehicles, like how did you have the wherewithal to keep going to make that happen, to
Yeah,
change?
that's a great question. So I urge everyone, right, regardless of what is it that you want to do, to always rely and lean in on fundamentals, right? But in this case, we're talking about fundamentals for what? Success principles. So during that transition period, I was getting my master's under KU Med, and to be honest, it was like an excuse. It was like, yeah, I'm staying busy, I'm getting busy, but I'm really like trying to figure myself out, explore my options for the future, and really, just like get an understanding of like, okay, if I was to pivot, how do I make the leap of faith, right,
Mhm.
with multiple parachutes? I
Mm.
love when people say commit all the way, burn the ships, and that's great. I'm all for that. But do that when you have your parachutes
That's
figured
right.
out. You know
That's
what I
right.
mean? Like I was like, I was like trying to figure those certain aspects out, So
Mhm.
you can either have reasons or you can either have excuses. And
Mhm.
in that personal development, self-search 2 years, 3 years of my time, I really figured out, what my purpose was,
Mhm.
and that's kind of the compass that guided me,
Nice.
Like I said, I kind of left all the details out, but growing up, like as a Jayhawk, basketball's always had a huge influence on me.
Mhm.
Now, no matter how wealthy or non-wealthy your family is, according to traditional culture, like they're just not going to support your athletic journey,
Mhm.
right? And when
Mhm.
it comes to anything academically related, even if they don't have the money, they'll find you the money, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for me, like just giving you some insights, like I made the team in high school, but I never got much support, and I always sacrificed, the basketball side of things. So when I went to KU, which by the way, when we won the championship in '08, I was 16. I was across at that time, my best friend's basement, with a couple of my
Hmm.
buddies. And we all, when we won against Memphis and D Rose and John Calipari, we all ran around the neighborhood screaming with our shirts off. So that
Yeah.
was like the moment that I got officially indoctrinated as a Jayhawk, right? Now I was,
Hmm. Hmm.
but on the athletic side, I knew I was like, if I had the right trainers and resources with me, I could probably walk on. But
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
never like everything for me is self-taught, right? Understand that.
Hmm.
Like if everything
Hmm.
for me is self-taught, if I just got the right guidance. Because what do they say in business? They say if you hang around with five or six millionaires, multimillionaires, or billionaires, you most likely be the next one, right? You're an
Yeah.
average of five.
Five
So for
people that you
me,
hang
I'm
out with.
like,
Yeah.
okay, well, can I do that in basketball? Because I never had, the right coaches that really poured into me. But at the same time, I was going to be a surgeon, right? So here I am. I'm kind of in this, I'm in my young 20s, right? But I'm like, I got my career and I got my basketball passion, and I'm like, I need to be a grown up. And I literally, I sacrificed so much on the basketball side of things
Yeah.
to the point where I remember I didn't even play basketball for an entire year when I had to
Yeah.
study for the MCAT. But what
Yeah.
happened was, like I said, as a Jayhawk, basketball's always got a way of pulling you in, and this really started happening when I graduated.
Yeah.
Uh, Kids who grew like graduate who were younger, I kind of made a little name for myself at the Amber Rec
Hmm.
Center. They'd always come
Yeah.
back to me and was like, "Hey, weren't you that dude? Playing on the main court, killing everyone, blah blah blah." And so long story short, I kind of recognized I was like, like I need to keep this going because when I look around,
Hmm.
it's been like 10 years. I still don't
Yeah.
see anyone doing what I do, right, in the demeanor at which I do it. And
Hmm. Hmm.
so, like not only does it come from a love of the game, but it kind of evolved from, oh, okay, this is no longer a privilege, but it's a responsibility in
Yeah.
Sure.
terms of representation, you
Yeah,
know,
no, it makes perfect
you
sense.
know?
And that
Yeah.
part that you're talking about, right? Like having your dream. I think so often you said something when you were describing it, like you like, I gotta grow up. I gotta do what's responsible. I gotta do the thing, right?
Yeah.
And you talked about earlier how you were groomed to take over your father's business, even though you knew that wasn't for you. And that took courage to be like, that's not what I want to do. But you went and did another respectable thing because, right, with your dream, owning a basketball team and doing all the rest of that, there wasn't that support for it and that stand, and you would have had to stand out. And I think, Randy, we've coached a ton of entrepreneurs who have kind of gone through the same thing where
Mhm.
it's after they get to a point where they're like, I've stands and taken all I can take and I can't take no more, that they get there. So the fact that you were able to do that so young and realize that this wasn't the vehicle for you is really a testament, right? Like to being able to see it and being able to do it. And so how did you get from, realizing that this wasn't the right vehicle to Lightspeed investing?
Yeah, well, so that's a great question, man. So like as I got out of college, the basketball thing started to really manifest, right? So there was that, and I had to figure out how do I make it work. And so it was by understanding that if I could get around mentors who are successful ahead of
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
can compress my learning curve. I can compress my journey in that sense. So during that master's period, which again, to everyone else, it was just an excuse that I was getting busy. I was staying busy. I went after mentors. I studied greatness. I studied wealth principles. I studied success principles. I binge watched Shark Tank because that was one of the few ways I could indirectly hang out with Mark Cuban, the billionaire who also
Mhm.
owned the Dallas Mavericks at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Please understand mentorship does not have to be direct,
That's right.
like, right? Like in person talking to that individual. Books, audiobooks, other resources that allow you to get in proximity to their
Yeah.
life experiences help
Mm-hmm.
tremendously because now if you ever get the chance to actually encounter them in person, guess what? You got something to talk about, right? Because you now have substance to bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that helped a lot. I went after like 20 mentors during that time period, and eventually I compressed, 20 of them down to like my top three, my top couple handful, right? Narrowed it down to really five and then three. And
Hmm.
that's really when I started honing in on Grant Cardone. So the top three ended up being Grant Cardone, John
Hmm.
Maxwell, and Alex Hormozy, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
my first online mentor ever was Ty Lopez, right?
Oh
This
yeah.
is
Hmm.
back in
Hmm.
like the summer of 2016, man, here in my garage
Yeah.
video. And,
Yeah.
and having that video, and the 67 steps program led
Hmm.
to me
Hmm.
finding out, about these other entrepreneurs, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's
that's
so
kind of
funny. I
that,
did
that
that
was
same
that was the
program in
genesis.
2016.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
was
was the genesis.
literally just listening to Ty Lopez because I've watched him, and with the retail
Hmm.
ventures thing not doing what it was supposed to do, and then his partner coming up with the AI stuff. And so I was
In the mentor
watching a
box.
video.
Yeah.
I'm watching the fact that, there was something that really worked for him. And it was that style. It was just coming on saying, hey, listen, I want to teach you a couple of things. Do you want to see
Hmm.
it?
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's that kind of style that has put cash in his pockets, even though he has tried other things and they haven't, turned out the way he wanted it to. Retail ventures
Exactly.
didn't do well, but he kept
Right.
on moving. I'm curious about something, and I want everybody that listens in to up until this point. I want you to start thinking about what Phil's talking about. The choices that were before him, potentially good choices, but one less certain than the other, right? Let's unwind that a little bit. But if you notice, he says, "Listen, I built something, a parachute in this case. We like to say, well, I'm gonna walk that tightrope, but I'm gonna put three nets underneath me. Is everybody good with that? There will be no
Right.
failing on the nets, right? So I'm gonna do that. So listen to that information, y'all, and reverse engineer it to wherever you are right now.
Mhm.
Have your choices, but also have other opportunities that keep you from falling to your peril. Right?
Right. So that
All
you can
right.
avoid catastrophic failure. That's the big thing. I think so many,
Well,
to your
yeah,
point, Randy, there's so
true.
many people that, right, because there's this kind of bravado that's out there that's like, I just did it. You just got to jump off the cliff and you don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
let's be clear here. And I think Philly, you were talking about this as well. There's a way that you can be adventurous, that you can take risks. But if you actually pay attention, Tony Robbins talks about this in Money Master the Game. What the super wealthy do is they don't actually take, just outlandish risks. They take what they call asymmetrical risks, right? Where the
Mm.
downside is dramatically limited, but the upside
Yeah.
is awesome. And I think
Yeah.
that's a little
They
bit about what
mitigate
you
Well,
risk.
I
what you're
was gonna
talking
say,
what you talk about.
where it comes from, right? So the core philosophy of success in medicine is always prevention over treatment, right?
Mm.
Because if
Hmm.
you do not smoke, probability of lung cancer decreases drastically,
Hmm.
right?
Exactly.
So that's kind of how I've always operated, right? And I
Hmm.
think a lot of my medical training for certain insights, right, that was given to
Hmm.
me. But you have to realize, like, me taking over my dad's accounting firm, that's, in the realm of a business professional, to being a surgeon, that's still like business professional to medical professional. But then you look at the jump to like NBA team owner, and embracing the unknown of how could you
Yeah.
foster that kind of opportunity like that.
Hmm.
We're talking about a whole magnitude,
Hmm.
right,
Hmm.
Exactly.
of a gap. This is like that business professional to medical professional, that was like, I would say like maybe two or three steps, right? They're just like
Yeah.
adjacent neighbors. But like
Yeah.
this is like climbing over mountains. So how do you get that done? Well, that's when I knew I was like, I gotta learn from people who've done it, right? So
Hmm.
I went after, it's really simple. Like you know, if you go after the top, everything else usually falls in line, right? If I have the blessing of LeBron, Kobe, and MJ, it don't matter who else wants to talk to me in the league. Like you know what I mean? Like I
I like
got I
that.
got the dogs with me. So
Yeah.
that's always right, the mindset. So I knew, okay, I got technology on my hands. I literally, dude, on Audibles, Amazon.com, I just type in the word billionaire. Okay, billions. And I
Mhm.
just see what kind of resources on that level I can get. Because in order to own an NBA team, you need at least 5 to 10 billion in today's market, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, and literally books like $1 Billion Secrets, and I'm just going off the top of my
Hmm.
head, From Homeless to Billionaire. Um,
Hmm.
God, Shut Up and Listen, I think, from the owner of the Rockets. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, so the whole point is like Tillman Fertitta,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
successful
Hmm.
restaurant. But the whole point is, I went after billionaires. You know,
Hmm.
like that's where I got my knowledge. When I'm saying like before I even took action, before I
Yeah.
executed,
That's the
I was
skip the
trying
line
to
approach.
enhance,
I love that.
right, my own business acumen, my success acumen, my understanding of how the world works, just so
Yeah.
that I can position myself and stack the odds in my favor.
That
Yeah.
part.
There's this approach that Rob and I talk about a lot, right? And I'm
Mhm.
creating some products around it. And it's like, just do what the gurus do, right? Let's skip the line. I know James Altucher talks about
James
that.
Altucher, yeah.
I read his book and it was skip the line. I mean, he's kind of a
Hmm.
different dude, but the information was just so dope. It's like, okay, well, how would you skip the line? Well, one, you talk to people that helps you compress the knowledge. Who else talks about
Hmm.
that? Alex Hormozy talks about it all the time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now the fact that we have platforms that allow access, free access, there's literally nothing we can't do. In fact, Rob, I was just editing a video. My wife heard me in here screaming and hollering because, the tech was going slow and I had messed up and
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And I was
Hmm.
literally talking about an app that I came across that just opens up the field of doing anything, literally, right? And I'm talking
Hmm.
about it on the video that you can literally do just about anything. We're going to take this particular AI app and we're going to then put something very popular in there and it's going to replicate it, right? The reverse
Hmm.
engineering opportunity. And from that, you get a chance to learn, if you want to learn how to code because you'll see the code. It'll do it right there in front of you. Or if you
Hmm.
say, well, you know what, I'm gonna skip past that too. I'm gonna compress the knowledge and I just want the results. Now we're doing it literally leveraging what's there in front of us. The rest is up to you. And this is what we talk about a lot, Phil, is we talk about what is that difference between, okay, I know the knowledge there. Okay, I know that billionaire is there. He's over there or she's over there on YouTube or she's in a book. Yeah, but I don't want to read
Hmm.
or I don't want to listen to Audible. So how do we help people get past that?
Well, like I said, so you can either have reasons or you can have excuses. So if you're telling me that that's your struggle, then you have much bigger problems to in terms of drive and motivation, right? Because you have to realize like I can be Phil Jackson and you can be Michael Jordan, but if you're not even willing to go to the gym to put up reps, like how are you, there's no chance.
That
There's
part.
no
Hmm.
chance. So like
Hmm.
it's a two-way street, right? Even if you were blessed to have an opportunity to have someone guide you, if you're not willing to receive the guidance, to do the work necessary to grow, then you don't deserve it. You know,
Hmm.
now how can someone get past that, right? Because this is meant to, provide value. So you have to understand, like, the action really does not matter so much. It's about your commitment. Because if
Hmm.
you're committed to something, right, you do whatever it takes. If
Figure it out.
if you have commitment with passion because you love it, like it shouldn't be work.
Yeah.
I tell my team members all the time, as president and CEO, I work part-time, full-time, and overtime. But at the same time, I do not work at all. At the same time, I do not
I
work at
love
all.
it.
And that's
Hmm.
because, I truly love what we do
Yeah.
within the firm, but on top of that, I love who I do it with. Because
Hmm.
you could show up to a not very high paying job, but man, if you got great coworkers that you look forward to working with every day, they fill you up with joy and energy. Like
Yep.
it goes by so much faster, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
So
know exactly what you're talking about because, like,
yeah.
when I was in the Marine Corps, the whole thing that we always talked about was, right, Marines don't do the Marine Corps because of the paycheck, right? Like, everybody that I knew, especially because, like, I was a lawyer in the Marine Corps. So I'm definitely taking a pay cut being a lawyer in the Marine Corps. But the people that you do it with and the passion that you're doing it for
Mhm.
with and the purpose that you're doing it for
Yeah.
transcends all of that. There's
Yeah.
so much fun and so much, purpose that we had in the work that we did. So that makes perfect sense, man.
I love that, man. I can see that as a 3P opportunity, right? Proximity to purpose that can then equal profits, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I like
Who
that
are
right
you
there.
putting yourself around that is doing that thing that is purposeful, right? Now, where are you going to find them? Like Phil had said earlier, it can be an online mentor. I got a lot of them, right? I'm looking at my
Mhm.
board right now. I'm looking at YouTube channels that I like. My wife comes in, she
Mhm.
says, "How are you going to go through all those?" I don't go through all of them. I take a little bit in
Mhm.
piece, I get inspired, and then I go to work because I can reverse engineer just about anything. And now we've got the tools, we've got the
Mhm.
platforms, we've got the opportunities to do it. What's left is you. This is the part that Rob and I like to talk about a lot. We poke into, okay, you, what are you going to do now that you have the information? Now that we've just dissected some things and given you some pathways, what are you
Yeah.
going to do? And it
Yeah.
never, I mean, that seems to be a well that's really, really deep.
Yeah,
What are
definitely.
you going to do well?
Well, and you know, a couple of points on that. So number one, right, when you start engaging in this journey, you have to realize, like at the beginning, you know, you may say, "Oh, well, how do I know who's right and who's wrong?" Right?
Mhm.
And but here's the thing, if you do it enough, if you have enough repetitions under your belt, let's say you
Mhm.
start going after 5 resources, 10 resources,
Mhm.
you start noticing if you're truly paying attention, there are some messages that are the same, but just expressed differently. And that's when you know those are probably fundamental universal truths,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know? And
Mhm.
on top of that, you know, Randy, you asked the question, okay, well, if you wanna, go through an audiobook or read, you're like, but I don't want to. How do you get past that? Well, you don't fall in love with the act of reading or listening. You have to fall in love with the having the desire to be better every
Yeah.
single day. Like
Yeah.
you know, like every single day you wake up, it's like you have an empty sculpture and you're working on your masterpiece, which is you, right? You're just sculpting, you're drilling, you know, a new part of that masterpiece, and you're hammering it
Mhm.
every single day. And so, you know, the listening, the reading, the mentorship, that's all just part of it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is like the number one thing that matters is, are you willing to work on yourself?
Yeah.
That part.
Yeah. I love that, man.
And what
Self-discovery,
gets people, oh yeah,
self-improvement through
and what
entrepreneurship.
gets people there, like what you're talking about, is understand. There was something you said that was like, once you understood what your purpose was, right? Once you understood and you got
Oh, that's
aligned with
so
your
true.
purpose,
That's
then
so true.
it made perfect sense for you. And that's what a lot of, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs get to this place where, like you just talked about it, right? You had graduated from school, you were already on your way to becoming a medical professional. It wasn't a question of what can you do, right? You knew what you were capable of. You knew that you had already proven to yourself that you could do what you put your mind to. And a lot of people get to that space where it's like, so what should I do? And that's where they get really frustrated. And just like you said, Phil, until you can get enamored with your purpose, enamored with where you're going, enamored with that end of the road place, right? Nietzsche said it this way: person can endure almost any how if they have a why that's big enough,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the biggest key, right? A lot of people think, well, I just got to grind. I just got to be disciplined. No. Like it's cart before the horse. The thing is, figure out why you're doing what you're doing, and the
Yeah.
grinding and the being disciplined and all the rest of that will be easier. Will have purpose, will have meaning once you know why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And so I think that part that you
I love
just kind of
that.
talked about is so powerful. But I want to because I know the audience is on this cliffhanger because we left off the story and you dropping gems, so this is really awesome. But I want to get back to, so you figured out where you're going and now you're on this pathway to getting your to learning how to get to billionaire status, and you then find your partner and Lightspeed Investing. How does this come about? And tell us, what is Lightspeed Investing?
Yeah, so at its core, Lightspeed Investing represents a group of medical professionals who are now investment professional, right?
Mhm.
So my business partner and I, you know, we manage money for high net worth individuals, couple million and up, right? But the thing is, for those that don't have that capital, we will actually teach you how to get there, right? Our subject matter expertise is specifically within futures, commodities, and stock options. Now, not a lot of people are going to know about this space in general because the traditional education system just does not cover it. Like literally, unless you're someone heavily immersed within the financial districts of the world, you just would not be privy to this information.
Mhm.
Right. So when I had first met him, and you please recognize, like I was my own independent business owner. I wanted to stack the odds of success in my favor. So I knew if I hung around high caliber individuals in high caliber business rooms, I would probably have that chance. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was when I was really studying and learning under Grant Cardone, okay, I started with the small things like the audiobooks, the books. So that was like $50 to 100, and then you go to like $500. But it started, making sense and working. So then I invested more. So I had already like had this habit of like investing in myself, right? This is really key. So then I
Hmm.
go to, the bigger things, the four-figure things, the five-figure mentorship, and then
Hmm.
in-person events, right? Now, because I had already been doing that, uh, at the time when I ran into my business partner, I already had a lot to bring to the table. But more importantly, I was so indoctrinated in personal development and knowing,
Yeah.
okay, this makes sense, to invest into. I actually started as a client of his
Hmm.
educational program. Like this
Yeah.
is really key here. I started as a client, and as a matter of fact, when I met him at the event, it was before the turn of 2023. So I took it was the end of December of 2022. I mean, the end of November of 2022. I literally took an entire month to
Hmm.
assess what he told me, the information that he was inviting me to, giving me access to.
Sure.
And at the
Hmm.
end of that year, I was like, this makes sense. I'm gonna do it, but now I have to revamp my entire schedule. Like, and this
Hmm.
is a huge key. Coming out of that event, I had my own execution plans with my team, and I had to eradicate like 85 to 90% of that to
Wow.
accommodate me going into his trading program. You understand that?
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not just paying for a skill set. I'm paying for proximity. I'm paying for the
Hmm.
ecosystem.
Sure. Yep.
And what happened was during those intimate client conversations, that's when, we recognize, okay, hey, there's probably a huge opportunity if we decided to merge our skill sets together, right? We
Hmm.
gave the business partnership a test trial, and in that first month, he delivered, I delivered, and the rest has now been history. But when we even
Nice.
first met, that was kind of like we kind of knew that potential could be there because we just clicked. He was the last person I spoke with. We ended up speaking for an hour and a half, and we walked out of the event together. He's a full
Wow.
internal medicine physician. He's also
Hmm.
about a decade older than me. So not only is he like my business partner, but he's like my mentor. But
Hmm. Hmm.
here's the key though. And I asked him this because I was curious. He said there was no way he would have done business with me had I not been immersed in the medical field. Had I not if
Hmm.
I was not the aspiring surgeon that I was. So what
Hmm.
I want you to recognize here is like things stack, because I was so
Right. Yeah.
obsessed about being the better version of me
Hmm.
when I
Hmm.
actually met this gentleman who is way ahead of me, right? Runs a hedge fund. And in that moment, I was like, okay, my dream of owning an NBA team is no longer a dream. I can actually see a pathway to reality. Like, but for
Yes.
him to be able to, get into a mental state of this kid is backable and this kid is deserving to be my business partner, right? Like I had to go through my own journey and development so that I had enough to bring to the table, right?
Hmm.
Gosh,
So, and so I
that's
just
so
want to
important.
recognize that this was not like an overnight thing that happened where I became president CEO, just
Yeah.
because. Like,
Yeah.
y-
Yeah, no, I've been going through. It's so funny that you talk about that because like one of the things that, and I know Randy, you and I, we've talked about this in a number of different masterminds. Sometimes it feels like things aren't happening or things aren't happening in the time that you want them to happen and all the rest of that. And this time and time again, I see like you can. Steve Jobs said this. You can only connect the dots looking backwards, right?
that's right.
You can only figure it out
Right.
like what it was supposed to happen. But if you look at it, when you knew that you had to make the pivot, when you knew that you needed to do something different, that was 2 years earlier. But that person that you were 2 years earlier, had you met your business partner at that point in time,
No,
you
Correct.
wouldn't have been the person that could
no,
have been his business partner at that time.
no. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
That's
and in,
why it is so important to hold your faith,
yeah,
because the thing is, a lot of people they think, oh, why is it not happening now? The waiting process is like the little marination process. Because
yeah,
if you were to be presented with the thing that you want it right now, you might fumble it because
yeah,
you're not ready for it. Like you don't deserve it.
yeah,
You know what I
Hmm.
mean? I
yeah,
a huge culture in our firm is meritocracy, where you earn your keep, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah,
So
meritocracy. Yep.
yeah, so it's like imagine if you're like, I want to be an NBA ball player. Okay, great. Can you even execute on NBA drills? If I gave you the opportunity right now to go
Yep.
out with, a private workout
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
an NBA facility, are you going to impress the coaches or are they going to be like, why did you even drag me here to waste my time? You see what I'm saying? Like
That's
you
so
got
funny.
Exactly.
that self work, that self work has to be in place.
And
Yeah.
this is the thing that I want, again, listeners, let's reverse engineer this, right? Who do you have to become? Rob and I, we talk about this all the time. I'm coaching a lot of people, and I ask, based on your goal, who do you have to become? Not what do you have to do? Who do you have to become to hold that vision, hold that discipline, and be able to surround yourself? Who are you that's going to be bringing anything to the table, right?
Right.
And oftentimes that's when you get the blank looks. I don't know who I have to become. I literally don't. So when speaking of that, I'm curious about a couple things. Actually, I'm curious about how did you two meet? I'm really curious about that. Did Because Rob turned me on. He says, you got to talk to this guy. You got to talk to
Yeah.
this guy.
So again, it's one of those serendipitous things, right? So I met a colleague of Phillips at a networking event, and it
Mhm.
was one of those things where what they were talking about, it was really interesting. Um, I love and I want you to get into this, Philip, the Lightspeed investing, especially
Yeah, who will? Who will?
non-medical professionals, right? I was a legal professional, but not a medical professional, and now I'm a business owner, so I'm way even out of the legal profession. But but long story less long, it was met somebody, vibed with that person. They introduced me to Philip. Me and Philip got on a call and vibed and really loved his energy, loved what they're doing over at Lightspeed Investing. And it was one of those things where it was like, we got to figure out how
Yeah,
to do things
if
together.
memory serves, I think you may have met my secretary, Evelyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then it led to subsequent introductions, and here we are. But Lightspeed Investing at the most simple description is that we are a make money firm. Randy and Robert, people do business with us because we either make money for you or we teach you how to get there.
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
what do we make money in, right? That's the conversation. So it's specifically the global financial markets, right? Under alternative investments within derivatives. Okay. So you have futures and commodities, which is known as the most lucrative asset class out there
Mhm.
within alternative investments. And then you have stock options, which is the second most lucrative. Futures and commodities have produced bona fide billionaires, right, in this space. There's a gentleman named John Arnold. Arnold took 1.5 million to 1.5 billion in 2.5 years, trading the commodity natural gas the
True.
right way.
Yep.
You also have Mr. James Simmons. He recently passed away at age 86 last year, and his net worth was a little bit over $30 billion, right? The thing about him is it did not take him his entire lifetime to amass that wealth. It only took him about 15, 16 years as he really ventured into this space around his late 60s. So futures and commodities is the most lucrative asset class. It's created a lot of billionaires. But the reason for that is because of the risk and volatility,
Mhm.
which is why a lot of people, right, they are encouraged to stay away from it. Now, the reason is because they simply don't know how to manage and leverage that risk to their favor, to their advantage.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have futures, creates a lot of billionaires. Then you have stock options, which is less risky, is a little bit more conservative, but it still great because it can serve as a great hedge in any investor's portfolio, and it does create a lot of millionaires.
Yeah.
So we've actually had physical time on the exchanges, and that's what we bring to the table. Because you have to recognize if you can trade really well, you first start by trading for yourself. You then trade for others, which is our money management division, right? But
Mhm.
if you have the track record and experience to back it up, you can actually trade for banks, institutions, and trust funds, which we've all done, right? So,
Yeah.
that's why we're coming up on I think like 18 years now in this point of the firm. I've been CEO for about two. It's actually this February. This is the beginning of my third year, but the firm's been around for about 18 years now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, man. I
Happy
enjoy
anniversary, brother.
I enjoy conversations like this from a little bit of a distance, right? In that I got a guy. So, I told my guy had a meeting with me, my money guy, I like to call him. And, midway through, he says, hey, man, we're up 97%. And I was like, yeah. And then the last meeting was like, well, we ended the year and it was okay, right? It was enough to, create a salary for somebody, but it wasn't that 97%.
Yeah.
And I was talking with recently, or actually last year, I was talking with Terrell. Yeah, I think you know Terrell Daniels that owns.
Mm.
Oh gosh, I can't think. But anyway, this is what he does without sharing too much of his business. But he takes his firm's money and he trades it, right? So his job now, because he's been so long in the business, is not
Hmm.
literally running the business. It is running the money of the business and growing
Yeah.
the money. And that's when he started talking to me about
Yeah. Professional money
here's
manager.
how, yeah, here's how you keep from losing all your company's money by putting in, puts and all these different
Yep.
things. And it
Yep.
was,
There's stock options.
yeah, I was not as familiar with that side of it,
Mhm.
right? Because I used to be the mutual fund guy. I would go buy my mutual funds and all that kind of stuff back in the day. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is nice. Oh, 30%, 33%. Oh my God. And then when it was down like 38%, 40%, 67%, and I was like, okay, I can't take this. I
So
jumped
Phil,
out.
talk a little bit about that difference. Kind of what's
Yeah.
the difference in the commodities and the ways that you
Yeah,
all trade
it's pretty
versus kind of
simple,
the
right?
standard
Yeah, so you have
mutual
to
fund
realize
guy?
there's that dichotomy of traditional investments versus
Mhm,
non-traditional alternative. So what
Hmm.
Randy just described, right? Under traditional investments, you have things like stocks, real estate, bonds, treasury
yeah.
notes, mutual funds, even colleges, right? Your traditional college education. That's a
Hmm.
traditional investment. And under this sector, right, the how you become successful mostly is through what we call fundamental analysis because it's
Mhm,
this is more so long term
Hmm. Buy and
value,
hold strategy.
right? Like you, Randy, you're buying and holding, right? You
mhm,
purchase a specific at a specific point in the market and
mhm,
then you didn't do anything. Now we always have a saying when we look over here, we don't rely on fundamental analysis, it's technical analysis. So
mhm,
for us, we make money off of the oscillations.
mhm,
And the more oscillations there are, right, which in futures there's a lot because of the volatility, the more money that you can make. So if you bought the market and all this time you held it, right, you would make nothing because it's flat. You see? But if you
mhm,
look at like if you imagine like all these graphs and you have like ups and downs, we're making money on the movements. And that's the difference. So it's short-term investing with an active skill set. And what we're doing is we're not your typical day traders investing half an hour to an hour and a half,
mhm,
right? We're surgically precise. We're looking to be in and out of trades within minutes, okay? And we're only entering trades when we see that setup that makes sense, right?
sure,
But if you
sure.
do it right, you can get a daily income and you can also create wealth from that. That's the crux of futures, commodities, as well as stock options, right? Stock options doesn't move as fast, like the oscillations is not as crazy as futures, and
Mhm.
that's why you can use it as a great hedge,
Yeah, I
a
love that.
hedging mechanism. Yeah.
So I'm
Nice.
really curious about this now. Now that we've got, AI everything, how has
Yeah.
that affected how you or what tools you're using? I guess that's the best way to look at it, right? You don't have to get specifics on what tools you're using because I remember the high frequency trading and the tools that they use and being as close to where the action is, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? But now we've got a lot of AI that is now trying to get into the trading space. Are you using specific tools or do you
Yeah.
still kind of
No,
take it
no,
on?
no. That's a great question. You have to realize like AI is great, but it can only do so much because the when you deal with super volatile markets, like and this is where we're going to get into the nuance of things. So I can go a little bit granular, but I want to keep it high level because I know not a lot of
Hmm.
people know about
Hmm.
this. So like, there's a difference in markets. Like with the Nasdaq, it's really hard with AI because the Nasdaq's super volatile.
Mhm,
Like, but if you trade the Dow Jones, the US 30 index, the AI can be, I would say, a bit more suitable. But then even when it comes to that, like there's certain ways that the markets move that AI just cannot detect as well. Like when it comes to specific single candlestick patterns
mhm,
where the
mhm,
markets really shoot up and then shoot down
mhm.
the next movement, that's really hard to track. AI is really more suitable for spotting trends,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Because it's a bit, more steady.
Hmm.
Like if I use surgery as an example, it's like AI can handle creating predictions for the simple surgeries.
Mhm,
But man,
mhm,
when you got a patient with, potential for huge risk and complications that can go unhinged in the OR room, that
mhm.
robotic surgeon is not going to be able to handle it. Like that's what, it's like you got to leave that thing to the
Yeah.
robots.
Yeah. No,
You know what I mean?
it
Yep.
makes
That's
perfect sense. I
interesting.
think one of the things, and Randy, we've talked about this with AI a lot, right? The 80-20 principle of it. Like AI can take care of 80% of the stuff that's necessary to do the job, but one of the things that it'll never be able to do at the level that human beings can do it, especially at the level that exceptional human beings can do it. And I think that's one of the big differences, right? Success
Hmm. Hmm.
versus competence, right? Is the decision making ability, right? And to be able to decide consistently in the right way, given the things that are going on, and to be able to take that. What AI is really good at is synthesizing a lot of information, and
Sure.
it'll make a decision, but it'll have that thing right at the bottom that says, prone to making
So I'll
mistakes.
give you an example. I was consistently taking 10%. I was able to take a 10% profit from my
Hmm.
principal investment in December as well as January. This is leveraging one of our most conservative strategies within stock options. Okay, is called for us it's called a zero DTE algorithm. Okay, we were leveraging an algorithm, but the algorithm is currently right now not dependable because of certain black swan events happening.
Hmm.
Okay. Also, it was not reliable around November of last year because of the presidential elections. And when
Mm-hmm.
you have an election, right, it influences volatility. Like
Sure.
knowing these certain things, this is what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, in traditional, in conventional circumstances, the AI was performing really well. But see, when you also have additional knowledge of your industry,
Externalities, yeah.
certain, yeah, events, like right now, we know, okay, we gotta just do our own thing
Mm-hmm.
and not rely on the AI
Yeah.
because it's not going to be able to predict it that well. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
you're going to lose money way more often if you, as opposed to relying on your own brain. That's why
Right.
it's so important to have that substance. That's why it's so
Mm-hmm.
important to go after being the world-class surgeon first and foremost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can relax a little bit and figure out how can you automate things with the tools,
And
right? Or
use the tools,
whatever.
right?
Because you have to think
Yeah.
about AI like the robotic surgeon. It's like, can a robotic surgeon, do everything? Especially in more high stakes surgery? The answer is a clear
Right.
no. You know what I mean? No matter
Hmm.
how
Right.
Hmm.
how
No, it
how
makes
optimal you try to tweak and get it.
it makes
That's
perfect
fun.
sense. I think there was a saying that said what was something like uh paintbrush in the hand of a master can paint a masterpiece, right? Paintbrush in the hand of a regular person is just a paintbrush, right? Like it's not the tool that creates the masterpiece.
That's right. Yeah, you can put they call it the emperor's robe on anyone, right? But you can tell the difference when you actually put
Yeah,
it on the king. You know?
I like that. I
That
like that.
leads me to a question, Phil.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
curious about this. Now it seems like you've built a platform that's two-sided, right? We're talking about on one end we do the work, on another end we train. What is the training component? Are you looking for a superstar? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, our training, we want people that are committed. We come from a world of professionals, so our core demographics are professionals ranging from medical to IT to engineers, real estate investors, CPAs, because they're training, right? They've gone through rigor. They've developed resilience.
Hmm.
We're not trying to train the world, right? We have a private mentorship that where we seek to take just a handful of people a month. But you have to also recognize, like, the reason why we do it, right? Not only are we passionate about the educational division because we believe strongly that regardless if anyone does anything with these markets, they should at least know about it, right? So
Hmm.
that's number one. Creating additional exposure and awareness because, for me growing up, when I pivoted to, to look at what's out there for me outside of owning my dad's accounting firm, hedge fund and futures and commodities, right, and stock options was not on there, right? It was just not, it's not public information. It's doctor,
Yeah.
lawyer, or engineer, and you have your life and career set, which in 2025, we all know that that's no longer the case, right?
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
number one, Randy, like the educational division is meant to give additional, I would say, awareness to the public so
Gotcha,
that
I love that.
they know, okay, this is something that exists that I can look into. That's number one. But number two, we're also passionate about educating the right individual
Mhm.
because the educational division also serves as a great recruiting division. You have to
That's right.
understand we're no longer at a point where we struggle with high caliber relationships or capital. Like speaking right now, I have multiple investors, right, ranging from 100K to 500 to a million, all the way up to 8, 9, and even 10 figures
Hmm. Hmm.
who literally, they can throw money at us. But the point here is not the money, it's can you perform on the money? And so the educational division also serves as a great development pathway for those that want bigger things. Please understand this can be a supplemental income. This is a skill set that can facilitate supplemental income, but it can also become a full-time income, and it can also be a full-blown career. Because
Yeah.
we've actually
Yeah.
retired medical professionals from their careers if they wanted to, and that's the asterisk. Is once you get into this ecosystem, would you like to do more? We have clients who are just clients, and that's fine. But a lot of people internal with the team, like if you look at me, my secretary, my right hand, we all
Mhm.
started as clients, right? But we're now, blessed to have a bigger role within the firm because number one, we have certain things to bring to the table, right?
Mhm.
Two, right, we see what the firm is about and we want to contribute to it. So,
Mhm.
in that sense, we're only seeking to train a handful of people, and ideally, we train people that also sees our vision, so that when they get competent, they have an opportunity to also manage money, and become one of our money managers.
Gosh, that's so good.
As a matter of fact, my team members that are currently taking on investor money, they started as clients. They were graduates of this program who have now developed the competence to make a minimum of, anywhere between a couple hundred a day to $1,000 a day, right? So, that's kind of the person that we look for. It
Yeah.
is, I would say, professionals, and also the three categories is professionals, business owners, mid-size and up, as well as people sick and tired of, you know, a 9 to 5, people sick and tired of building someone else's dream. They're ready to take control of their own destiny,
Hmm. Hmm.
learn a skill set that can, not only change their lives, right, but they can really do something from an impact standpoint.
Gosh,
Nice.
man, I love,
Nice.
I just personally love that approach. The idea
Mhm.
that you have a training component, and this is something that, Rob and I talk about this a lot, that I train into my entrepreneurs. I go, hey, you have to have some kind of component whereby you can eventually train someone to take over perhaps for you, to buy your
Mhm.
business, or for you to spin them off into an opportunity. And that typically looks a little weird to them because they're so used to doing it themselves. So when you
Mhm.
said that there was a training component, my ears just like perked up. I wanted to dig a little deeper because we see the value of it, right? I was watching one of Hermosi's more recent ones, and I'm looking at his video, and I'm saying this guy is training his people. You
Yeah,
can tell he was getting upset about something. I'm like, okay, he's building content.
yeah,
I'm, consuming that content, getting some value. But the real thing here is he's training his folks. And now he can
Mhm.
say, just look at the video.
Yep.
That's that training component
that's
that
right.
continually, man, 360 is a business. I love that. I love it.
Well, but
Yeah.
training is also so important because it helps create duplications, right? And it helps create
Mhm.
that assembly line for the systems and processes, right? You
That's good.
need
Yeah.
systems and processes if you ever want to scale, and go do bigger things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So you also have a pod, right? So
yeah,
I've been
I do.
watching a couple of the videos, and I sent you some information. I was able to, I guess I was feeling myself, and I said, well, I'd really like to send him a gift. Well, I just took a couple of the one of the episodes and just created some content around it, stuff that you're kind of already doing,
Uh-huh.
already, and it was just fun. Tell us about that component, how you're adding in the podcast as a means to do what?
Well, the podcast is a means to create awareness, right? But it's also how are we creating awareness? Well, it's connecting with great people like you guys, right? So it's relationship building.
Mhm.
Podcasts also for me similar to when I decided to make that pivot in my career, right?
Mhm.
There's
Mhm.
different ways of
Mhm.
marketing, right? So you can be a content creator, you can post a lot, you can be on TikTok, you can be on Instagram, right? For me, podcasting made the most sense because it fit in with my natural personality. This is
Mhm.
also why I left medicine, right? Because
Mhm.
on the way to becoming a surgeon, I had to take the new MCAT. So the new MCAT's like 8 hours. So when you take a mock exam, not the real thing, just training the mock exam, dude, that's like 8 hours of mental, physical, and spiritual exhaustion, right?
Yeah.
So
And
why
the
am
Yeah.
I
only
doing
time I
this?
got to talk to someone was when I would go take a food break or when I got my Starbucks.
Yeah.
So when I'm
Mhm.
expressing to you as Randy, like not only is it a great way to cultivate relationships, create exposure and awareness that ties into our firm's mission and vision,
Uh-huh.
but it is the modality at which I am the most not only comfortable but
Mhm.
passionate, right?
Nice.
Like
Yeah,
we're technically working, but I'm not working. Like I'm just doing my thing.
exactly.
This is a
Exactly.
STUNNWe conversation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
That's
That's
all it is.
actually how this podcast even came to be. Basically, me and Randy, we mastermind. We get on, we talk. We were doing it anyway. We were like, you know what? We
Yeah.
should probably
Yeah.
probably record
Were
this.
you always doing it on a phone calls, I'm guessing? And then you were like, why don't you just do it on like a Zoom?
No, we
Yeah,
started on Zoom, right?
We
And
started on
I've
Zoom.
got a couple of podcasts, and but I just like talking to Rob, and he's always sharing some insights. I says, man, I don't care if 5 people listen to us. I want to listen to
Mhm.
you.
How did
Right?
you guys get acquainted?
Oh,
So
it was
that
through a money
story is
guy,
fun.
wasn't it?
So it was our money, right? It was our money manager. So a money manager ago for Randy, right? I had met somebody because I was new to town, and he was like, "Oh, you need to meet my other client. You need to meet my client Randy." So he introduced us. We got together. Matter of fact, I think our first official in-person meeting, you actually interviewed me for another podcast
Oh
that you
man.
were running. It was like your Make Money Online
Oh
podcast, I
yeah,
think.
the Earn Every Dime
Uh,
Online podcast. That's
Earn
right.
every
That's right.
dime, every dime online. Yeah. So this is
Oh,
like
so
what, 7 years
you're
ago,
both
eight
in
years ago now.
Michigan, right?
Yeah,
Up
we're
north?
both in right. We're
Yeah.
both in the Grand Rapids area, and
Yeah.
so since then we've done a bunch of different things together, coach entrepreneurs and do a lot of different work. Done a couple joint ventures together. We do like it's been awesome, and this is like I said, this stuff that we're doing right now, it's not work, right?
Yeah.
This is our like if we go a couple of weeks without recording a pod, we like, man,
I
I
miss you,
need my
Rob. Where
conversation.
you at? I gotta
Right,
tell
bro.
you some
Like, why
stuff.
you so busy, man? Because like Randy likes to go and take 30-day vacations and stuff. So sometimes he be gone for a while.
Set it up, put it on automation, baby. That's what I talk about this a lot is creating the opportunities for people, right? Anytime I introduce myself, sometimes
Yeah.
I'm scratching my head and they say, well, what do you do? I said, well, I help people monetize their lives using digital real estate and online properties. And then that gets this kind of look. Okay, what does that mean? So whatever you create, something that you can create, set, and forget to the degree that
Hmm.
you can set it and forget it, right? That's a digital piece of property. I used to have online or on the street properties, and it was like, oh man, I got to go clean another toilet, or I got to go deal with DHS on my payment, stuff like that. And I just packaged all those things, man,
I mean,
sold them,
content
and
is
retired.
currency nowadays, man. It's important.
Yeah, and
That's the
that's
key.
it, right? How can you do it at a scale that is not work? I
That's
wanted to
right.
Yeah.
work last week. I was like, Rob had to remind me, you do realize it's Super Bowl week. And I was like, okay, what are you
Well,
telling me?
okay. Let me be straight. Let me be straight. That would not have normally affected my attitude, but my team was playing. So then I was
See that
like,
part.
listen, the Chiefs is in the Super Bowl. I'm more of a
Hey, and
dog than the Chiefs, but right now we have
yeah,
an opportunity to create
yeah,
history, go after a
yeah.
three. So,
There you
Yeah.
go.
you
And
know,
and I've been getting with
I actually
Randy, and
picked
this is
him.
one of the things that I've started learning recently, right? All work and no play makes a very, very bad day. So I've I've learned in the last couple of years how to rest and how to relax and how to take right days off. Like I used to live that grind mentality, and it's a burnout mentality. It's one of the things I teach my clients now. How can you live a harmonized life? And so that was one of the things I was telling
yeah, no,
Randy. We're
it's
gonna
work-life
harmonize
harmony, man. It's work-life harmony.
exactly
That's
There
right.
is
work
no
life
Not
balance.
harmony.
balance,
If you want to
harmony.
achieve greatness, there is never a balance. You just got
That's
to figure out
right.
how to integrate what you love
Exactly.
with how
And
you
that's
go.
what I do. I told Rob,
There
I
you go.
says, I am a hunter, a farmer, and a trapper. There's times when I'm hunting, but while I'm out hunting, I'm looking for places where I can plant some stuff. And then if I can plant some stuff and I'm going to chase one rabbit, I'm going to put some traps down to catch it too.
Yeah,
So that
that's
becomes why it's so much fun. And when I'm teaching and
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
facilitating, it just becomes
So
a great time.
so this has been awesome, and I know that we really appreciate your time, Phil. How do people get in touch with you? Like, how can they find out more about Lightspeed Investing and your podcast and everything? Where you want people to reach out
Yeah,
to you
man.
at?
No, just if you heard about me from this podcast, just let me know via LinkedIn. Just message me on
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
at Philip Jayhawk Chan, right? Under Lightspeed Investing as well. But just you gotta type the Jayhawk in, right? That's why it's there.
There we go.
There's many Philip Chans out there, but there's only one Jayhawk, right? So just
I
message
love
me
that.
on LinkedIn. Let me know
Nice.
that you know you heard through this podcast, and then we can schedule something and have a deeper conversation.
That's it,
Awesome, man.
everybody. I appreciate you coming on. You have taught me a couple of things. I'm going to be looking funny at my money guy. I got somebody that, so get those 97% back up. None of
Yeah.
this 35 stuff.
Yeah,
Since
yeah,
when are we
yeah.
complaining about 35% returns? But whatever.
When inflation is what it is. 35% ain't the same thing as it was when the interest rate was at 2%.
All right, everybody. I hope that you're able to listen in and win. Now, we talk about this all the time. What is the framework? I talk about the learn, create, get paid framework, right? From what you have learned, what will you create and how will you then position it to get paid? Now, Rob and I, we're here to help you with this because this is what we do. Now, we've got somebody else that can help you at a different level. If you're ready to do what Philip and his company does, all right, we'll just make the introduction. But if you need a little bit more to get there, well, we got your back. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming on.